Well, welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks for joining us. First off, thanks to everyone for your outpouring of support for my father as he announced his retirement on Friday's show. The outpouring on Friday, Saturday, Sunday has just been a real blessing to him, and so thank you for that. And especially thanks to Terry for honoring him. That was such a wonderful thing you did.
29 and a half years we sat next to each other.
Let's not forget the half.
Yeah, the half. They matter. No, but it was a wonderful time of, I think, your dad just talking about his future. He's going to be working at Regent University full-time, doing his tremendous responsibilities there, but coming back here in moments of perspective on what's going on in the world and spiritually, and we look forward to that. And then he and Wendy are going to continue every month to
every month, and he's going to come back and give his perspective. In the effort of full disclosure, no one knew it.
Yeah.
We had planned a whole week of retrospective to honor the 60 years of broadcasting. Everyone expected him to go forward. So the whole week of programming that we did last week was without the knowledge that he was going to make that announcement. A few were let in on it a week ago Friday, and that's how all of the press releases. But anyway. I covet your prayers, especially in the coming hour of my need. Well, turning to the news, Hamas has received a crushing blow from one of its longtime allies. The government of Sudan has seized a number of the terror group's financial assets, crippling its efforts to wage war on Israel.
Well, the move is an indication of larger changes taking place in the Middle East. Chris Mitchell reports on the growing impact of the Abraham Accords.
While Hamas in the Gaza Strip remains a formidable military foe to Israel, the decision by Sudan strikes at the way Hamas finances their terror state.
It's a blow to Hamas' financial capabilities, which is important by itself because Sudan was a major center where Hamas economic activity was taking place and was the main source of income for the organization, for the movement.
Retired General Yossi Kupavasser is the former head of Israel's military intelligence. He says Sudan, once a state sponsor of terror, is shifting its alliance to the West.
It's important for Sudan because it's a message that it is really trying to get rid of its past as a hub for Hamas activity and Hamas financial activity.
At one time, Sudan was a hub for radical Islam, even harboring Osama bin Laden in the 1990s. But in 2019, the Sudanese overthrew dictator Omar al-Bashir, and the government began to change. Last year, President Trump paved the way for a Sudan-Israel peace when he removed Sudan from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Kupavasser says the Abraham Accords played an enormous part in Sudan's decision.
Definitely. I think when Sudan decided to embark on this initiative and join the Abraham Accords, they knew what is the price. I mean, I think that the Americans and maybe even the Israelis were delivering this message. You cannot have the Abraham Accords on the one hand and keep supporting Hamas on the other.
The move also represents a wider shift in the region. On Sunday, for the first time, Egypt Air flew directly from Cairo to Tel Aviv. And last week, Bahrain flew its first direct flight to Israel. On the same day, Israel inaugurated its embassy in the capital city, Manama. Gordon?
Well, Chris, tell us the bigger picture here. What does this do to developments? What does this signal to the region and especially to Iran?
Well, I think it does, Gordon, it signals that these countries are really closing ranks right now. All these countries see Shiite Iran as their mortal enemy, and that's why so many of them are concerned if the U.S. renews the Iranian nuclear deal. Why? Because they see Iran right now as paving the way for a nuclear arsenal. And they see Iran on the verge of getting weapons-grade enriched uranium. And also they see Iran's proxy threatening them, too. For example, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards are training and funding groups like the Houthis, and they threaten Saudi Arabia. Hezbollah and Hamas, they threaten Israel on its northern and its southern border. And Iran right now is just across the Persian Gulf from many of these Gulf states. So right now we're seeing these alliances in the region growing and getting stronger due in large part to their common enemy, Iran.
What does this mean for Hamas? I think many people don't know that Hamas diverts humanitarian aid. They divert the fuel that should go into power plants, actually sell it so that they can buy weapons. They intentionally keep the population unemployed and in poverty. What is this going to mean for Hamas and the funding of its terror networks?
Well, it's a big blow, Gordon, right now. But it is. They also do get funds from Qatar and Iran. But actually, this funnel from Sudan was very, very important to them. As you said, unemployment is 65% right now in the Gaza Strip. 4 to 12 hours a day. People don't, that's the only kind of electricity they have. So they take these millions of dollars and they do divert it to their military infrastructure, whether it's tunnels trying to get into Israel itself or the weapons. The Iranians provide missile technology, so that's what they're building as well. And so they really do keep their population sort of under the iron fist. But nonetheless, this is going to be a blow to them financially. But their ideology remains the same, Gordon. They're committed to destroy the Jewish state.
Well, tell us the benefits to Sudan. I think many people don't understand that either, that when people come to peace with Israel, now suddenly they open trade with Israel. What are the benefits going back to Sudan?
Well, they're going to see the same kind of benefits that other countries right now in the Abraham Accords are experiencing. More technology, tourism, greater investment. Right now, the UAE and Bahrain, there's already $1 billion worth of investment between Israel and these countries, and that's growing. Also, remember, Sudan is rich in oil, but it's also one of the poorest countries in Africa. So Israel really could be, and they want to be, a partner with Sudan to sort of raise them up, to come alongside and be a blessing. And Gordon, I think it's part of the DNA of Israel. They want to be, just like the CBN documentary says, to life, Israeli volunteers to change the world. They want tikkun olam, that Jewish concept of healing the world, and they want to help Sudan.
Yeah, light to the nations. I think they're really going to help Sudan with agriculture, with irrigation, with water technology. It's going to be an absolute game changer. So this is wonderful news from the Middle East. Well, Chris, once again, thanks for your insight. Well, President Biden's domestic spending agenda remains at a standstill. It was scheduled for a vote last week, and now the deadline has been pushed to the end of the month. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. A $1 trillion bill to fix roads and bridges stalled because progressive Democrats are demanding action on the $3.5 trillion spending bill proposed by Senator Bernie Sanders. The measure would fund social programs like child care, free college tuition, and efforts to fight climate change. Progressives vowed not to support one without the other, but moderate Democratic Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona are standing in the way.
We made clear 3.5 months ago that the two had to move together because we don't want to pit roads and bridges against childcare.
What is non-negotiable?
You know, I think some of the climate provisions that we have.
You're going to run right into Senator Joe Manchin.
President Biden reportedly telling the senators the social spending bill needs to be cut to between $1.9 and $2.3 trillion. Now, another roadblock. Progressives are saying they won't support the massive spending package if it includes the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits taxpayer money from funding abortions. Well, sad new milestones in the COVID-19 pandemic this weekend. Global deaths topping 5 million. And here in America, more than 700,000 people have now died because of the virus. However, there is encouraging news. Hospitalizations are down considerably for the first time in 3 months. And the drug maker Merck is planning to seek authorization for an antiviral pill that could cut COVID-related hospitalizations and deaths in half. Well, today, for the first time since the pandemic hit, the Supreme Court will hear cases live in person, all except for Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who tested positive for COVID and will join by phone. During this term, justices will hear cases ranging from abortion to gun rights. CBN senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon has more on the court's docket.
The first Monday in October marks the beginning of the Supreme Court's new term. This year, the high caseload is getting attention for the number of cases that could lead to major life changes in America.
Do this in memory of me.
Each year, the Red Mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral marks the beginning of the High Court's term. This year, the 9 black-robed justices, 6 Catholics, 2 Jews, and 1 Anglican, will decide major cases on abortion, gun rights, and the First Amendment. The most talked about is the controversial case over a Mississippi abortion law, which some believe could weaken and even overturn Roe v. Wade.
The issue is, can you ban abortion after 15 weeks consistent with the Supreme Court's decisions in Roe?
That case, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, is set for December.
I think it's largely going to turn on whether there are 5 justices who are willing to, accept the political heat that will come from overturning it.
Not to be outdone, a challenge to New York's concealed carry law.
Essentially, you cannot engage in any open carry of firearms, and you can't engage in concealed carry of firearms unless you have a license.
At issue, whether states have the right to restrict the Second Amendment, the first time in 11 years that a major Second Amendment case heads to the Marble Palace.
This will be an interesting case to kind of see the new dynamic on the Supreme Court.
Also on the calendar for this term, the First Amendment, pivotal to deciding cases ranging from Maine's prohibition on school funding for schools providing religious instruction to the raising of a Christian flag on government property in Boston. The 9 Supreme Court justices began the new term facing a plummeting approval rating and a presidential commission studying the makeup of the High Court. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thank you, Jennifer. Gordon, a busy and consequential term.
Incredibly consequential term, and a consequential term for all of us. But let's point out, the Supreme Court should have never been allowed to legislate from the bench, and they've been doing it now for decades. What started out as something Justice Marshall put into place, that it was a judicial doctrine that was literally invented by him, that the Supreme Court gets to rule whether things are constitutional or unconstitutional. The good side of that is it gives us an extra protection for our constitutional rights that's over and above our right to vote. And they enforce our rights, and that's a wonderful thing. But when they start to legislate from the bench, they become a political arm, and they're unelected. And so there's nothing that people can do other than really focus in on judges, and then that makes it a very political process. And we've seen that play out in the approval under President Trump, just how politicized these things can be and what it does to the nation, that you're, instead of looking at judicial qualifications, you somehow want to read the tea leaves of how they're going to vote on Roe v. Wade. It should have never been set up this way. And it shouldn't happen now. But it's interesting to see on the political left, everyone talking about, can they stand the political pressure? Well, the political pressure has been applied from the right for decades, and they've been able to stand it. So it might be time for this to turn around.